Okay, so in part one of this lecture, we just finished covering the parietal lobe. In part two, we're moving on to the occipital lobe, which processes visual information. So if you've ever been hit in the back of the head, you've probably experienced disruption in your vision, temporary disruption. That could happen if you got hit in any part of the head hard enough, but the back of the head is particularly vulnerable to visual disruptions because that's where the neurons are in the cortex that process information about vision. So in Module 17, there's a topic called feature detector cells, which I'm going to address in this module because it relates so well to the visual cortex. Feature detector cells are cells in the visual cortex that process only very specific features from the environment. So for example, some of these modules only process vertical lines. That's all these neurons do. Some of these neurons only process horizontal lines. Some only process angled lines. Some only respond or fire to curved lines. Some only respond to angles. And what's amazing is that they're highly specialized to process just like one specific type of visual information. And then when you think about how complex the visual environment is in front of you at any given time, it's amazing that all these highly specialized neurons are doing their own little processing, just their one little bit of information, but our brain is combining all that information into meaningful wholes. So what we see are, of course, not a bunch of random lines all over the place. We see everything in their correct position, and the brain's ability to combine all that into a meaningful whole images is just amazing. So I wanted to show you a video that where some researchers are talking about the work they did when they discovered that these cells are highly specialized, and their work was occurring in the context of work with cats.
The researchers actually listened in to individual nerve cells firing in the anesthetized cat as they presented it with different visual images.
When we started working, Torsten and I, in the late 50s, we set up our first experiments, and they didn't go well because at the beginning we couldn't make the cells fire at all. We'd shine lights all over the screen, and nothing seemed to work. And rather by accident, one day, we were shining small spots, either white spots or black spots, onto the screen, and we found that the black dot seemed to be working in a way that at first we couldn't understand until we found that it was the process of slipping the piece of glass into the projector, which swept a line, a very faint, precise, narrow line across the retina, and every time we did that, we'd get a response.
So what's really unique about that then is the fact that originally they thought it was the black dot that was causing those neurons to fire, and if you could listen closely to the video, you could hear the neurons firing, but it turned out that it wasn't actually that black dot. It was this faint line on the edge of the slide that was sweeping downward that was causing the neurons to fire. And when you watch the video again, it's pretty interesting because when they put the dot or the slide back in this upper direction, the neurons don't fire. But these happen to be neurons they were listening to, highly specialized neurons that only fired when they only processed angled lines moving downward, and that's the only thing those neurons process. So I'm going to play that little part of the video again. If you look closely, you can see that.
way that at first we couldn't understand until we found that it was the process of slipping the piece of glass into the projector, which swept a line, a very faint, precise, narrow line across the retina, and every...
Yeah, pretty amazing. I still love that research. One of my favorite studies and how things in psychology get discovered sometimes is pretty amazing. So aside from those highly special areas like the visual cortex, then would be the association areas where we store information for how things sound. Or I'm sorry, how things look visually, not sound, visual information. The next lobe is kind of located near our ears, and that's called the temporal lobe. And this temporal lobe processes information about sound, so processes auditory information. And here we have another highly specialized language area called Wernicke's area, and it's discovered by Carl Wernicke. And this area is different from Brokaw's area. So you'll have to remember for the test that Brokaw's area Brokaw's area is for speech production. Wernicke's area is related more to speech comprehension or understanding of speech. So this Wernicke's area and Brokaw's area are both addressed in Module 26. I want to point that out because I think I forgot to point that out when I covered Brokaw's area. But you'll find them mentioned in Module 26. So if you damaged Wernicke's area, one of two things could happen, or maybe both. One would be an impairment in your ability to speak meaningful sentences. So you might speak real fluently because if you don't damage Brokaw's area, you have no problems moving the muscles. So your speech can be very fluent, but it might not really be meaningful to anybody. And the other problem would be auditory aphasia, which would be an impairment in your ability to understand what other people are saying. So it'd almost be like perhaps waking up from a car accident and having your parents there, saying, "Oh my gosh, thank God you're awake. How are you feeling?" But to you, it would sound like a foreign language that maybe you haven't heard before. So Wernicke's area is highly specialized for speech comprehension. I'm going to show you an example of a guy who had a stroke, and Wernicke's area was affected by that stroke. And you pay attention to his language. It'll be pretty obvious from this video that he speaks fluently, but see if you can make sense of what he's saying.
Hi Byron, how are you?
I'm happy. Are you pretty? You look good.
What are you doing today?
We stayed with the water over here at the moment and talked with the people for them over there. They're diving for them at the moment. They'll save in the moment. He'll have water very soon for him. With luck for him.
So we're on a cruise and we're about to
We
get to
will store it right here and they'll save their hands right there for them.
And what were we just doing with the iPad?
At the moment they don't show a darn thing.
With the iPad that we were doing. Like here?
I'd like my change for me and change hands for me. With Happy. I would talk with Donna sometimes.
Okay, so you can see that his speech is very fluent, so this isn't a problem with coordinating the muscle movements like you would find with Brokaw's aphasia. This is just the fact that his speech isn't making sense, so that's related to comprehension of language. An interesting phenomenon related to that, most people with Wernicke's aphasia, they don't realize that they aren't making sense to other people, because in their head it does make sense. What they're trying to say does make sense, and so it can be pretty frustrating for people who have that problem suddenly. A lot of confusion in why people aren't answering their questions or responding to them in the way they think they would or they should, but they just don't realize that they're not making sense of that. So also in the temporal lobe would be the association areas where we store memories for how things sound. So if you look at the images on the screen, this is a brain imaging technology that's recording where the bright colors represent where the most neurons are firing, and you may be able to match that with the tasks listed on the left: hearing words, saying words, thinking about words, or reading words. If you want to pause the video now, you can do that and see if you can answer those. And after you pause it in a little bit, I'm going to draw lines connecting each one to the correct answer. So if you want to take some time to figure it out on your own first and see how you do, pause the video right now. Okay, so if you've unpaused the video, then I'm assuming that you took a chance to see if you could answer. Let's see how you did. So hearing words is an auditory task, and that would require a lot of neurons firing in the temporal lobes. We just covered the temporal lobes, and that would go with this area here. Saying words, so speaking words, which would require muscle movements. So that would involve the motor cortex and specifically the area right next to that, which is Broca's area. So this is the back of the frontal lobe, and this area here is Broca's area in the motor cortex. Thinking about words, we do a lot of thinking in the frontal lobe, so this would be the best match for thinking about words. And reading words would require a lot of visual information, so that would be the occipital lobe in reading words. But even a task as simple as reading from a book, it's important to point out that there's a lot of neurons in all the lobes firing. So for example, when you're reading, it is a visual task, but you would also actually have some neurons firing in Wernicke's area, because reading is also a comprehension task. You would also be moving your eyes across the page, which would require the motor cortex. You might also be holding the book, which would require muscle coordination, so again the motor cortex for that. And you would also feel the book on your skin, so that would be the somatosensory cortex. And so my point there is our brain is, all the lobes of the brain are pretty active on even fairly simple tasks, and I don't want anyone to leave the class feeling like all these tasks are so highly specialized throughout the entire cortex that only one part of the neurons, or like only a small cluster of neurons, are firing at any given time. That's not true. So okay, so we're moving on. We're talking a little bit about brain plasticity, and we know that when people have brain injuries from strokes or whatever, maybe impact to the brain, that oftentimes the impairments they have initially kind of improve over time. And that's because of brain plasticity. Now, the brain isn't very good at growing new neurons. In fact, it's pretty bad. Same reason why if you sever your spine, you're probably going to be paralyzed, because the spine's those neurons are damaged and they won't grow back. There are some neurons that, new neurons that can grow from the, I believe it's the thalamus, and it's possible that they can migrate to areas of the brain that are damaged. But even if that is true in humans, it's probably not enough of that occurring to really make any huge noticeable difference in a person's improvement. The main reason that people improve after brain injury is due to plasticity, which I will discuss in the next part of this lecture.